This week on the Shame Free Life podcast radio show, we're going to have a serious yet candid conversation concerning the purpose of your wilderness.
Today is about the power of you.
We can be whatever we dream.
You're locked into another episode of 15 Minutes of Shame. Each week, we'll help you rebuild your life one brick at a time by addressing real life issues from a practical and biblical perspective.
I had to believe in myself like never before.
This is the Shame Free Radio Show.
Finding the solution to become the greatest.
And now your host, minister, author, grief and trauma support specialist, Dr. Ronald Zion Roseborough.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is it.
Good evening, good morning, good night, wherever you are from coast to coast and from around the globe. You are locked inside of another installment live inside the Shame Free Life radio show, podcast show. And I am your host, Ronald Zion. It's a pleasure to be back with you yet once again. Sorry it took me so long, but I promise that today I will be strong, and I have strength that's helping me out riding shotgun with you. I can't wait to get into the introduction concerning the purpose of a wilderness. But first, let's pay some bills, and we're going to take 2 quick commercial breaks, and we're going to be back with another strong podcast. Stay tuned. Have you considered continuing your education? Or do you find yourself, like so many, sidetracked by life, fear, or maybe even excuses? Well, I've come to tell you that there is no perfect time than right now. Time is ticking away. So get your degree today. Rehoboth International Bible College is an accredited institution designed to meet your higher biblical education needs. Simply go to RehobothInternationalBibleCollege.com or call 866-235-0812 extension 0. You are an investment, and it is past time for you to reap the dividends. Rehoboth International Bible College. Have you ever felt alone and life is out of control? Perhaps like a sailboat at sea in the midst of a tsunami. Well, you're not alone. Here at the Shame Free Life, LLC, we offer services in trauma recovery, crisis intervention, and empowerment coaching. We operate in integrity, confidentiality, empathy with coaching ethics. Contact us at theshamefreelife.com or email us at contact@theshamefreelife.com. You may not be responsible for your injury, but you are responsible for your healing. Let us help you rebuild your life one brick at a time, because your life begins when you say so. And we are back. The purpose of a wilderness. We've all been in a wilderness. If you haven't been in the wilderness, then just stick around for a little while, because I'm pretty sure that you will have a date with your own tailor-made, customized wilderness. And before I even get into it, I want to thank you so much for being patient with me. It's been a couple of weeks since I've been on, but I am on now and back on a consistent basis. But today I want to introduce an amazing scholar in his own right. Yeah, I said that. He's an amazing man. He's a father, husband. He is a prophetic minister of the gospel of the Messiah of Christ. He is also the founder and visionary of Inner Man Live, which is a nonprofit organization. And I'll let him explain exactly what Inner Man Live does and why it is so important in 2023 and beyond. He hails from Oaktown, for those who understand that, Oakland, California, and he is an amazing friend, and he has a heart for people, specifically a specification for men, young men, old, it doesn't matter, to see us bounce back from trauma and all types of adversity. And that's the purpose of the Shame Free Life podcast. From a biblical perspective, we deal with life's trauma and how to bounce back or to become unstuck. And without further ado, concerning this topic, the purpose of a wilderness, I want to present to others, introduce to most, Abdul, AJ, Fobbs. Welcome to the Shame Free Life podcast radio show. Absolutely. Tell us about Inner Man Live and anything else that you want to come to the table with on today.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. First and foremost, thank you for an invitation to come on board to such a wonderful platform and purposeful platform, strategic platform. I'm really excited about what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm also excited about, our friendship and, where we've come over the past few years and the vision that we have and what God has given us. So just excited to be here, man. And a little bit about, Inner Man Live. It is really an organization that God has given me to reach out to the unchurched man and those men who are estranged from church or the institutionalized church setting. There's been so much going on within our communities, specifically for Black men, but it obviously reaches beyond that. But so much has been going on with men. God just placed it on my heart to reach out and create a place that is a safe place for men to develop. And really, it's we ask the question, not are you a man, but more importantly, what kind of man are you? So we try to set up different locations around the country. We've done this working with churches in the past, but really now just really being a grassroots kind of approach to create environments where men can come together, man, and just be raw and be real, and deal with life, man. Deal with life from being a young man, being a husband, being a father, and tackling all the things that come along with that, and giving that again that free space to be able to speak freely, to be able to speak rawly, and really come up with solutions to help build in our communities.
That's beautiful, because it seems from my perspective that we have very few platforms and organizations that are geared toward that, because it seems to be so legalistic, so churched, so preachy, but not really doing life with people as Christ did, to raise up an army, to raise up men, to deal with issues that oftentimes we feel ashamed of, because because to bring those issues to the forefront of so many churches, you're deemed to be less than who you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, you're right, man. I mean, and that's, one of the things that we do as well, or we say that we do, is we're building men from the inside out. Many times in our communities and in the culture that we live in, we like to surround ourselves by the outward appearance. Mm-hmm. So if we go out and we get the bag, or we have a position or a title or whatever the case may be, even the title of husband, the title of father, we have that on the outside, and it looks good on the outside because we do everything within our power to construct the outside appearance, to paint it up, to wash it up, and do all of these different things. But the reality is no matter what the outside looks like, who are you on the inside? What are you building from the inside out? And those foundational truths and strategies, man, I believe are going to put our communities in position, and the men in our communities in position to grab a hold of what we need to grab a hold of for the women and the children in our communities as well.
Absolutely, absolutely, and so let's get right into it. With that being said, because there are a lot of men that are listening right now, and they may find themselves in the wilderness. Women that are listening right now, they may be in the wilderness right now. But when I look at what is a wilderness, I saw a couple of different definitions that I want to submit on this afternoon. Now, one of the definitions means in uncultivated, uninhabited, and inhospitable region. In uncultivated, uninhabited, and inhospitable region. Another definition, a neglected or abandoned area. Also, the last definition, a position of disfavor. So a wilderness is, comprises of all of those particular definitions and more so, but it's a place that is not favored, it's uncultivated, it's desolate, it's lonely, it's not habitable, except for the person who is in the wilderness, but it's not conducive to life. And we all have found ourselves in a particular place or space in life when all of those definitions fit our current dilemma. And one of the scriptures that came to mind about a wilderness being a place or a space in life and in time was Exodus chapter 2, verses 10 through 15. And it says, and the child grew. What child? Well, we're talking about Moses. So Moses grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. So she called his name Moses, saying, because I drew him out of the water. So Moses means, the literal definition means to draw out. So he was drawn out of the water to be drawn into Pharaoh's house. Verse 11. Now it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown that he went out to his brethren and looked at their burdens. And he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. So he looked this way and he looked the other way, and he didn't see anyone. And he killed the Egyptian and buried him in the sand. And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 Hebrew men were fighting. And he said to the one who did the wrong, why are you beating your friend? Then he said, who made you prince or judge over us? Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? Oh, somebody saw him. So Moses feared for his life. Surely this thing is known. In verse 15, when Pharaoh heard of this matter, he sought to kill Moses. Now he's on America's Most Wanted, so to speak. But Moses fled from the face of the administration of Pharaoh and dwelt in a land of Midian, and sat down by a and this was in a wilderness. Abdul, this particular reality that took place in Scripture, it showed that how Pharaoh sought to kill Moses. He was now a fugitive of the law of Egypt for murder. And at this time, he was the second in command in all of Egypt. I mean, what better position of power and influence and status to have. Everything at your fingertips. And now it seems like you on your upswing in life, moving forward in life. But there's something that's on the inside of you that seems to be greater than what you've been exposed to as it relates to your status. And so now, as you heard, he stands in the midst of two of his brethren fighting to try to extinguish that, and killed the Egyptian. Now he's on Egyptians' most wanted list, fleeing, and he finds himself in the wilderness. Can you begin to just give us your take on this particular situation, and how if you found yourself in a similar situation, maybe those listening right now may have been in the wilderness, may be in a wilderness where they were doing fine. It seems like their life was clicking on all cylinders. They're moving up the corporate ladder or moving up in a particular business. And now it seems like the rug has been pulled out of from under them, and they find themselves in a rock bottom place. Can you kind of speak to that?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's a pretty powerful passage and historical account of what happened with Moses. And as you were reading, I was just thinking about even before he went to the wilderness, and we'll get to that. But even before he was drawn out into the wilderness, the Bible talks about that as he went out one day, and he saw an Egyptian beating one of the Hebrew brothers and whatnot. Now Moses, like you said, he had been raised up in the house of Pharaoh, obviously educated under under Pharaoh's system of education, trained as a warrior in many different ways, a high status that he had accomplished. But it goes back to what I talked about with Interman Live when you're talking about an inside job. Building from the inside out. And I believe that that's what God was beginning to do with Moses, because no matter what the accolades were or the accomplishments that he had and all the things that he was accustomed to in the house of Pharaoh, there was something on the inside of him that he came to a place of an identity crisis. Knowing it's something about knowing who you are, or coming to an understanding of who you are, because in this particular passage, Moses coming to an understanding just a little bit about who he is. Man, it changed his whole perspective. All the stuff that he had accomplished became secondary in his mind, and put himself in that position to say, hey, man, I'm going to stand up for this Hebrew brother of mine, because I know who I am. Now I can identify with what it is that they're going through. And sometimes, man, God uses that, man, our lack of understanding of who we are. We need to come to an understanding of who we are, or at least have that journey, or the door of that journey to be opened up. But then coming into a wilderness, as you said earlier, a dry place, man, a place that is inhabitable, a place where it is not known for producing anything. God is so wonderful, man, because he uses the very thing that the world would say, it ain't nothing out there that can be done out there for you. It ain't nothing in the wilderness place. I would never. What do you expect to accomplish in the wilderness place? But God uses the very thing that someone says is nothing, but uses that very thing to bring something into existence. And I believe that that's what he was doing with Moses. That's what he does with all of us, man. When we think about our wilderness experiences, it is really, for me, it has always been a time for God to strip me of unnecessary foolishness that I've been accustomed to. Unnecessary foolishness. And most of the time when I've been brought into a wilderness, man, it's been against my will. It's been like, something has happened to drive me, just like with Moses. He didn't go to the wilderness on his own. Man, something that happened in his life forced him into the wilderness. And God uses that dry place where it don't make sense for anything to be produced out of that. He uses that dry place to produce in us, to strip us from what we thought was production to strip us from what we thought was fruitful and bring us to a place that the world says is not fruitful, but then he does a fruitful job on the inside of us.
Mm. You know, that's very powerful of what you just said. And you talked about a stripping, and that's a perfect segue to get into, because there may be somebody listening right now that find themselves in this particular wilderness, their own tailor-made wilderness of being driven from something or being led to something, a place in time that doesn't make any sense because it doesn't corroborate with the very thing that they left, whether it's the career that they left, the job that they left, the relationship that they left, the church that they left, or whatever the case may be. Now they find themselves like frozen in time in this uninhabitable place, this place of disfavor and uncultivated to be cultivated. And so when you talked about that stripping, when we talk about the one of the purpose of a wilderness, and I want you to speak to this, is a place of sanctification. In other words, to be set apart. So, oftentimes we are just known by, or people know us by, your family and friends know you by what you do as opposed to who you are. If we were to meet on the street and introduce ourselves, if you and I didn't know each other, and one of the first questions that we would ask one another, hey, so where do you work? Or what do you do? As opposed to, who are you? What's your passion? But the first thing that we will ask, well, what's your 9-to-5 status? What do you do for a living? As opposed to, are you living for your purpose? And so it seems that Moses being pushed out of his 9-to-5, his identity that he was labeled as, to now being pushed into this uncultivated place in his life, to be relabeled, to be, when we use the word sanctification, that really means to be set apart for a use. So for a specific use that comes with an identity that we probably didn't have from the beginning. Can you kind of speak to being driven out or pushed into a place in life to be set apart for something that's unbeknownst to you?
Yes. So it's powerful, right? So the word of God, thank God for the word of God. I mean, because we have insight into wilderness experiences that Moses didn't have insight into. So we can look back and see in Moses' situation, one of the truths that we can draw from this is going into a wilderness, we understand, and it's probably one of the most important things that we need to understand about a wilderness experience, is that a wilderness experience is temporary. A wilderness experience is not permanent. It has a purpose, and it is a temporary situation that we are in the wilderness. And God has a bigger plan and a bigger purpose for us. But the wilderness is necessary, like you said, especially coming out of, even with the children of Israel coming out of Egypt at this point. And isn't it amazing that isn't it amazing that how God uses those that he's called to leadership? Moses had to experience his own wilderness experience before the people he were leading experienced theirs.
Wow. Yes, sir.
And so sometimes, man, you know, we are in a wilderness, an individual wilderness situation, because God is preparing us for leadership to lead others into a wilderness experience. So now Moses has experience of what God does in a wilderness experience situation. And it is an experience, man, as you stated, it's for sanctification, for setting apart. So as I stated before, one of the most important things to understand about a wilderness is that it's temporary. The other thing that is very important that we can gather from this, from the Word of God and this historical passage, is that there are in the wilderness, there are no matter what you got going on in the wilderness, because Moses continued. He didn't just stop living. He was still herding sheep and in interacting with other folks. He even got married in the wilderness, right? He got married in his wilderness experience.
That's good.
But the next important thing is, in your wilderness, you are going to come face to face with God.
Mm.
You're going to come face to face with God. So don't allow the temporary struggle, the don't allow being surrounded by a dry place, an unproductive place. Don't get distracted by those things and miss your face-to-face encounter with God that is setting you up to come out of your situation.
Mm. That's powerful, and it sort of brings me to the second point, as far as that I want you to tackle the purpose of a wilderness, not only just to be set apart, but also for redirection. Oftentimes, and I know in my own life, of the wilderness, and you talked about it being very temporary, but it seemed like it's been going on for a long time, whether it's days, weeks, months, or a year. You find yourself in a wilderness place that you want out of. It seems like it lasts forever, but it's temporary. But in that particular place of a wilderness, some redirection is taking place. To now go into a different direction. It's a time of connection, of coming face to face with the God that allowed you to be driven into this space or place of a wilderness. Now you have connection, but also now redirection. Have you ever been in a place in your life, particularly, where you've been redirected in your own particular wilderness?
Absolutely. So a part of the purpose of the wilderness is for redirection. And what that redirection looks like is different for many of us. But as we can glean some of the foundational truths in Moses' story. For him, it was to redirect. It was to redirect his attention away from everything, again, being stripped from, and it had already happened, in the beginning, but before he went to the wilderness, his heart started to change, because now he started to identify with the people of God, but he was not ready to go back. He was not ready to go and face. He had to face God before he could face Pharaoh.
Mm.
Right?
Wow.
He had to come face to face with God before he can come face to face with Pharaoh. So now, his attention and his duty and his responsibility to Pharaoh was subservient. He was subservient. So sometimes, man, we're subservient to that 9 to 5. We're subservient to whatever that situation is. We're subservient to this person or that person. And God uses a wilderness experience to set you up, to strip you from that foolishness and redirect you. And now you go back to whatever that situation was with authority. With authority. Now you go back to that situation with a word from God in your mouth. And a word from God. So sometimes that 9 to 5, that situation that we were in with a relationship we were in, or whatever the case may be, God strips us of all of that, and now we go back and not necessarily need to speak directly to my situation, but now I have authority because of my wilderness experience and because of my face-to-face encounter with God. Now I can go back. And those who are still enslaved to a 9 to 5, those who are still enslaved to an unhealthy relationship, whatever that is, now, because I've had that face-to-face encounter, I've been redirected from being subservient to my trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have authority to speak to set others free from theirs.
Now that's powerful.
If that makes sense.
Before we move forward, I really want us to really stay there for a second and marinate on that. So in being in Moses being redirected, as we all have been, is it safe to say that oftentimes that God will allow certain things to occur in our lives because we have been consumed with distractions? Whether it's distractions of relationship, whether it's distractions of being connected to an alliance that need to be severed, whether it's distraction of our job and how much money that's being made, or trying to pursue the bag and, being distracted by this, being distracted by that. And those things have become gods beside God. So the Most High will allow to be driven out from those things that have become the golden calves in our lives, to get us now to a place to be set apart in order to be redirected. So can those things become distractions? Even when it comes to religion, how that can become a distraction. So we begin to serve the church as if it is God. And so God will redirect us from those things that we have held up as being a God unbeknownst to us.
Well, I guess the truth of the matter is that anything in this life can become a distraction. Anything. Mm-hmm. Your calling can become a distraction. Mm-hmm. If you are consumed with your calling in a way that is unhealthy. For example, I was raised as a pastor's kid. My stepfather was a pastor. My mother was a pastor. And being around other pastors' children, one of the things that I have been, especially for very successful pastors, they have been so consumed with their calling as a pastor and a preacher that they are traveling all the time. They're doing all of this, they're doing this, but their children and their situation at home is suffering. It's suffering. So anything in life even ministry, again, can become a distraction. So we have to have a balance of what it is that God is doing in terms of our lives and what our purpose is. So absolutely, to answer your question, these things, the church definitely can become a distraction. How many women have, unbeknownst to them, and with their hearts were in the right place, but they didn't have somebody to explain and educate them on these matters. How many women have caused conflict at home because they are overly dedicated to a pastor in the church, but their husband is at home? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a distraction.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You know what's interesting concerning this distraction that you're talking about, perhaps that Moses had. We all have various levels of distraction, and they're all subjective. Your distraction is yours, and mine is mine. But the wilderness, it seems that it is designed to extract the distraction, to bring it to surface, that we can see what was in us that was always there all the time, that we have adopted it as just being a part of our personality. Well, that's just who I am. Mm-hmm. But it's not who we are, because now the wilderness will redirect us to a place to rediscover who we truly are. Mm-hmm. Besides the distraction. So when I look at Moses, there was some advocacy on the inside of him that rose to the occasion in the midst of what God was after in Moses when he killed the Egyptian, which, he killed him in anger. Many could say, well, it was a righteous anger. Some say that he shouldn't have killed him because, now he's on the most wanted list. He committed a crime against Egypt. If he would have quenched his anger, then he wouldn't have been driven out of Egypt. But I submit to you, what if it was the plan of the Most High to drive him out? Because his name means to be drawn out. So he was divinely drawn out, even in the midst of his mistake, even in the midst of his sin of committing murder. Can you speak to the reality, not making excuses, but how we all, the Bible says that all of our righteousness are as filthy rags, and that ain't giving us a license to just do whatever and live any old kind of way. But even in the midst of missing the mark, sinning against God, that he would even allow those things to occur to draw us out, to now draw us into a place to get the most of our lives in a wilderness like Moses. Because I'll say this, and I'm gonna let you take the mic, because he sinned out of anger in killing or murdering the Egyptian, but there was an advocacy for the Hebrews by him being a Hebrew that was needful for him to draw the Hebrews out of slavery. And so that advocacy was needed. It just had to be cultivated. Can you kind of speak to that?
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. I think, first and foremost, that the God that we serve, and you and I have talked about this, it's amazing how no matter how long you've been walking with God, man, the more and more he reveals himself, the more that we are in awe of. Sometimes you have to sit back. Sometimes I sit back and say, man, who is this God? And I've been walking with him for a month. It's like, but still, it's like, who are you? My God, who are you? And it's specifically speaking about how God can use whatever. He can use our sin. He can use our situations. He is the only God that could take tragedy and produce righteousness from it. He is the only God, even with the tragedy of the death of Jesus Christ. It was a tragedy. It was traumatic, but he is the only God that can take trauma and produce righteousness. The only God that can take trauma and produce righteousness. So now you said that it was the purpose of God to draw Moses out. Absolutely, it was. But what God does is, because Moses had free will, just like we have free will, God can take our free will and our foolish mistakes and our sins and use those sins to draw us to a place where we come face to face with him. I got a cousin, man. I'm not going to say his name because people would probably know him. But I have a cousin who is very well known and respected on a street in street life. And I mean, when he was out, man, he's a leader, man, fearless leader. I mean, a dangerous guy, but a leader, man. And was reckless and wild and all kind of stuff that was going on, but got caught up in a situation, man, where he ended up being imprisoned and doing a 60 to life term. But the very sin that he committed that caused him to his wilderness is that prison. His wilderness is that prison. And now, because of the sin that he committed, he is now in a situation where he's in a wilderness situation. And we're praying that God releases him at some point, but his wilderness situation. But now in his life, man, God has produced a righteous man behind those bars. So I say that to say, sometimes, man, when we do certain things, we in the midst of our sin, man, we're in the midst of our sin. And the Bible says all things work together for good.
Yes,
All
sir.
things work together for good, right?
Mm-hmm.
To those who love him and are called according to his purpose,
Mm.
right?
Yes.
So how many people who are in sin, but they still called to his purpose?
Mm.
He still got a calling. Moses was doing what he was doing. No, you think that's the first sin that Moses committed?
Come on.
No, no. But Moses was called from birth. He was called to purpose from birth. So everything that Moses had done up until that point, God can turn it around and use it, and it turned around for good.
So do you mean to tell me that whoever's listening right now, whether it's prison, whether it's rehab, whether it's a divorce, whether it's a foreclosure, you lost your job, whether it's you being ostracized by your family, that you're at your lowest low, whether it's self-inflicted or you were thrusted into it and it happened to you, that was traumatic. Do you mean to tell me that they have a purpose even in the midst of their wilderness of what they're going through right now? In other words, that God has not changed his mind concerning them?
Absolutely. And even further than that. Because in some of those situations, it's not, some things we get involved in, and it's not our fault. Some stuff is out of our control. But it's other stuff, other foolishness that we involved in is because we just directly sinned.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? We directly sinned. But the truth of the matter is, the life of the matter is that no matter what your situation is, if you are the cause of your situation, getting in that situation, or if it's out of your control, you have been called to a purpose in God, and he can take and use everything that you have done, everything, and turn that thing around for righteousness' sake. For righteousness' sake. As a matter of fact, everything that Moses, when even killing that Egyptian, everything that Moses had done, God turned around and used it to prepare him to become the leader that he was. Matter of fact, his advocacy or his anger in fighting for the Hebrew against the Egyptian, as unlawful as his response was, his unlawful response, unbridled, was a result of him being pushed to the direction of his leadership, if that makes sense. If that makes sense.
Yes,
even though it was unlawful, it had its roots in what God had called him to do in the first place.
You know, it's something that you said that's really resonating with me. Oftentimes, and I want you to speak to this, I want you to comment, I'm interested to hear your take on it, that serving a particular place or an identity, it has an expiration date when it conflicts with your divine purpose and your divine identity. We can take on the identity and even the purpose of trauma, of rejection, of abandonment, of abuse, of misfortune. And that will become a part of our DNA. It becomes a part of our very life. We become known by that from others, and we know ourselves by that because we've been in it for so long. But in the economy or the currency of God, that has an expiration date to push us out into our true identity and our true purpose. So, in other words, Pharaoh was being used. That situation, that job that Moses had, that way of life that Moses had to push him out and release him, or better yet, reject him, He had to be repelled from that violently. Emphasis on violently. To be pushed and separated from it. To go into a wilderness now to rediscover who he truly was. I want now here's my question I propose to you. Or better yet, a statement I really want you to now to feed back. Being violently separated from something, separated from someone, separated from a situation, to now get to a place of greater awareness and greater self-discovery of who you truly are and who God truly is, that you never would have discovered had you been allowed to be continuously connected to the very thing that had to be severed violently.
Was that a question?
Yes, sir. Speak to it.
So in thinking about what you were saying, how we are connected to our trauma, we're connected to our past, we're connected to careers, we're connected, and the way that works is the reason that there must most of the time, 9 times out of 10, the reason that connection must be violently severed is because that connection to trauma or that connection to whatever it is an emotional connection. Okay. And the emotional connection is so dangerous. We are fearfully and wonderfully made, man. We are complex in our makeup. God was, in his design, was very strategic, very meticulous, very intelligent in how he formed mankind. So what we've done is, because of trauma, because of all of these different things that we have gone through in our past, we connect emotionally to it, and it becomes our identity. Trauma, what I've gone through becomes my identity, because my emotions now are out of priority. My emotions become my masters. And so now, no matter when I'm going through something, it's something that's happening in my life because of trauma that has happened to me, because of whatever has happened to me. When my emotions tell me to do something, I do it. So now God has to violently separate us from that trauma, violently separate us from our emotions. And in the wilderness, what happens is there is a flip at what happens. So now, before the wilderness experience, again, your emotions are your masters. Your emotions tell you what to do, and I don't care what it looks like, because you can excel to the highest levels. I don't care what those levels are. You can be the CEO of an organization. You can start your own business. You can write a book and all of these different things. But that does not; those outward things do not solidify that you are healed. As a matter of fact, many times we do all of those things out of our brokenness.
Yes,
but we still find success. And the purpose of the wilderness is to separate you from those things. Separate you from. So trauma is no longer your identity. And now what happens is, what happens is you have to be stripped completely. You have to be stripped completely. It's kind of like when you are revitalizing something. You have to take it. You have to strip it to its foundation and build it up brand new again. And what happens in the wilderness experience? If we, because let me also say this: the wilderness experience is a temporary situation, but depending on what our surrender is, what our obedience is in that wilderness, we can prolong a wilderness situation because we've missed the points of encounter with God because we are in the wilderness, worshiping a golden calf, whatever that might be, in our own disobedience, in our own frustration. God, you doing this. I don't want to, I'm getting tired of being fed this way. I'm getting tired of, being taken care of this way. I need it that way. And it prolongs the wilderness experience. Because the purpose of the wilderness experience is to strip you and to separate you from identifying who you are with what you've been through. Okay. And then on the flip side of that, when you come out of the wilderness, when you've come face to face with God in the wilderness, when your heart is positioned at a place of surrender to God, when you have a reverence for God, you find reverence from God in your wilderness experience. Now what happens is you begin to identify with who God says you are, right? And once we begin to identify with who God says we are, because what God will do is first in the wilderness tell you who he is.
That's right.
He'll tell you who he is. So now that he's showing you and showing us who he is, we simultaneously begin to understand who we are.
Yes.
And when we begin to understand who we are, again, being fearfully and wonderfully made, not only from a spiritual standpoint, but we understand ourselves naturally.
Yes.
We understand ourselves emotionally. So now my emotions now become my servants as opposed to becoming my masters. You don't tell me what to do. My emotions now become tools that I use. They don't become masters. They become servants. I tell you what to do. So again, with Moses, check out the difference. Before the wilderness experience, Moses' anger, which were his emotional realm, was in control and mastered him. You're angry, kill that man. He did. But coming out of the wilderness, Moses is now, as God has told Moses who he is, he understands who God is, he understands who he is, he understands his purpose. So now he can go and stand before Pharaoh. Now this is still Moses. It ain't like he's the same dude that ran off them when they said he was by the well. And he ran off those sheep herders or whatever. He was still a man. He was still that man.
That's right.
He still had the ability. But now when he came out of the wilderness and came back into his purpose and was walking in his purpose, you never saw that reaction from Moses again. Does that mean that he didn't? Transformation. Does that mean that Moses never got angry again? Absolutely not. He had to be frustrated when he went before Pharaoh and had to go back to Pharaoh laughed at him and said, "Okay, so since you coming in here and you trying to tell me what to do, you go back and tell them people now they need to make twice as many bricks, but they without the straw."
Right.
So you don't think that Moses was frustrated and sometimes angry in those situations? Absolutely. But now the transformation has taken place. He's been stripped down to the foundation of who he is, and God has built him back up anew. Behold, all things have become new in him.
That's right.
So now he's not subject to what his emotions tell him to do.
And the interesting thing about this brother is that when he was in the wilderness and met God before he met himself, he met God, the creator of Moses, before he was introduced or reintroduced to the creation, which was Moses. And so it's showing me that wherever you are right now in your walk of life, in your own tailor-made wilderness, as you become introduced to God, now he introduced you to himself, because it kind of reminds me of the Messiah. When Yeshua, he asks, "Who do men say that I am?" And they said, well, John the Baptist, some say that you are Elijah, Jeremiah. They had already gone on. And so they begin to say, well, hey, listen, we're going to believe like all the other nations around us in reincarnation. So you came back from the dead, you one of these prophets. Okay, well, who do you say that I am? And Peter said that you are Yeshua, you are Hamashiach. You are the one that was prophesied of old to come. Well, I know that people, flesh and blood, didn't give you that revelation, but it had to have come by the Spirit of my Father, which is Yahweh. So since you know who I am, let me tell you who you are.
That's right.
You are Peter. You are Cephas. You are the rock. You are the apostle in which I'm going to establish my ecclesia, my movement, my kingdom upon. So he introduced us to who we are, because we don't know who we are apart from our trauma. Mm-hmm. And it's really amazing when you really hit on that. In the next couple of moments, I really want you to give us some bullet points as it relates to somebody may say, well, listen, Abdul, I'm in my wilderness right now, and I don't like this place. I hear what you're saying. I feel what you're saying. But how do I survive, or better yet, what are some steps that I need to take to thrive in this place that I don't like, this uncultivated place, even though that you say that it's uncultivated, but I am being cultivated in an uncultivated place. How do I thrive in this place? What do I do? How would you respond?
So I think first and foremost, and it may come across as simple. Some people are looking for complicated answer, but it's not a complicated answer.
Come on.
We've talked about it. The first thing that we need to understand is going into a wilderness with the right mindset. And the scriptures are for our learning. The scriptures we're reading, God has showed us wilderness experiences for a purpose. We can read about Moses' experience. We can read about the children of Israel's experience. We can read about Jesus' experience in the wilderness. We can read about these things for our learning. It gives us insight as to how we should handle a wilderness experience. Mm-hmm. The first thing that we need to do, again, we've talked about it, is from a mindset standpoint, because if you go in with the wrong mindset, you're already setting yourself up for failure. Mm-hmm. So the first mindset is understanding from what we've gathered from the scriptures is that my wilderness experience is temporary. Mm-hmm. Because what the enemy will come along and do is, oh man, you in this wilderness and make it feel like it is the end of the world. That this is God punishing you, and this is going to be the rest of your life. And sometimes in a wilderness experience, it feels like it's going to be the rest of your life, because the wilderness. You know what they used to say back in the day: time flies when you're having fun. You ever heard that saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot.
Well, the wilderness experience is not fun,
right?
So if it is true that that time does fly when you're having fun. And if that is true, the flip side of that is that time seems to slow down when you're not having fun.
Right.
So the enemy will come along and try to make you feel, and he's made me feel like my wilderness experience is going to be forever. And if the mindset is that my wilderness experience is going to be forever, and I stop depending on and trusting that God is going to bring me out of it, my mindset is going to transition to a mindset of survival, and I need to get out of this myself. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. So the first thing that we need to do is go in with the right mindset that this is temporary.
Yes.
The second thing that we need to understand and that we can glean from these historical accounts in Scripture is that again, what we know about a wilderness is that it's not a productive place, but God can produce in a wilderness and does produce in a wilderness. Okay, but it is not a productive place. So the second thing that we need to do is not be distracted by what we see around us as not being productive in the wilderness, because it's not supposed to be productive in the wilderness. Those things, a wilderness is not productive. What we need to focus on is what God is producing in the wilderness, even if we don't like it. Don't get distracted by the dry land.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get distracted by the grass is not growing and trees are not growing around you, and there's not a beach that's around you. Don't get distracted by that.
Or what
Focus
others,
on what
or the accomplishment that others may be doing or making.
are the accomplishments that others are doing, are experiencing. That's right. So don't be distracted by the unproductive qualities of a wilderness, because God is producing in the midst of that in the midst of that dry place. God is producing.
Yes.
The other thing is, the third thing that I would say is, and is the most important, because let me say this before I move to the third point. Again, we can glean from the scriptures. Why is it that the children of Israel, when they were in the wilderness, why in the world did they come to a place where they wanted to melt down this gold and create an idol? What would make them do that? They got distracted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Moses was taking too long. He wasn't moving God wasn't moving in the time that they thought that God should be moving.
That's it.
They didn't have the patience and the understanding to wait on. They lost their faith in God. They got desperate. They got desperate, and they got so desperate that when you get desperate, when you're in a survival mode, you are desperate.
Mm-hmm.
So let me create this golden calf, and maybe this golden calf can do something for me because God ain't doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third thing is, in your wilderness, and probably the most important, is those distractions. If you go in with the wrong mindset, first and foremost, number one, if you go in with the wrong mindset, and if you allow yourself to be distracted, you can never get to the third point, which is the most important. And the third point is, in your wilderness, you do not want to miss your face-to-face encounters with God.
Wow.
But if you go in with the wrong that this is not a temporary situation, and if you go in and you're distracted by all of the dryness and whatever that is that's around you, you're going to create a situation where you're going to miss your encounters, and it may be multiple encounters. So those three things, man. If I have the right mindset, if I don't allow myself to be distracted, then I'm definitely not going to miss my appointed encounters with God. I'm not going to miss my burning bush experience.
That's good. That's good.
I'm not going to miss my holy ground experience.
God today.
That's good. That is really speaking to me.
Yeah, those are the three things that I can say. Those are the three things that I would say that if you are currently in a wilderness situation, if you could take those three simple things, and it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. Wilderness experiences are not easy.
Yes,
they're not.
It brings about death and life.
Yeah.
That's so profound, because this is really it's really helping me, honestly, and I know that it's going to speak to those who are out there. And let's just quickly recap. So to how to thrive, not survive, but how to thrive in your own personal tailor-made wilderness. Number one, remember that it's temporary. Number two, do not be distracted, but stay focused. Do not be distracted by the sights and the sounds and how you feel in that wilderness. That's real. It's a reality, but don't be distracted by it, that you will lose your focus concerning the purpose of it. And number three, do not miss your God encounters. Do not miss your face-to-face God moments.
Yeah.
Those three bullet points that I'm so glad that you drove home. And tell everyone how they can get in contact with you if they want to reach out to you one-on-one, if there's any type of speaking engagements, how they can contact you, or as it relates to your organization, Inner Man Live, to partner with you, that you may come in to conduct any type of symposium. How can they connect with you?
The best way to connect with me right now, and again, I want to say I appreciate the platform, brother, and the time that we've shared today, and look forward to many, many more. But the best way to get in contact with me right now is through my email. My email is ajfobbs, AJ, F as in Frank, O, B as in boy, B as in boy, S as in Sam, at innermanlive.com. That's INNERMANLIVE.com. AJ Fobbs at innermanlive.com. And if you shoot me an email, I will be certain to respond and get back to you in a timely manner.
There you have it. We are so grateful to have AJ Abdul Fobbs reigning in from Oakland, California. AJ Fobbs at innermanlive.com. AJ Fobbs at innermanlive.com. Look him up. He's all on social media. Connect with this brother who's doing an amazing ministry and works out there in the streets to raise the consciousness level and to bring people to the awareness that you are more than what you've gone through. And so I'm happy about you being on. We've got to have you back on, definitely, as we take on more subjects and more taboo subjects. We're going to tackle them straight on. Thank you so much for stepping inside the Shame Free Life podcast radio show. And as I always say, and I will continue to say, that your life begins when you say so. Shalom and blessings to you.
Thank you for joining us on the Shame Free Life radio show for 15 Minutes of Shame. Follow us on IG and Twitter at Shame Free Life. For information on promoting your business with us, contact us at theshamefreelife@gmail.com. Until next time, your life begins when you say so.